after it's been like 12 years that I've been practicing the metta, and I feel that the words and phrases are like circulating all the time, and um, and I know even if it's not that conscious that they're always just underneath the surface. And we lost Thich Nhat Hanh, his body, this past weekend, 95. For those of you that aren't familiar with him, he wrote like 40 books, and this was one of them, The Heart of the Buddhist Teachings. And so 12 years ago, this was my first introduction through EBMC, a class. This book was my introduction to the loving kindness of what Thich Nhat Hanh would call true love. And yeah, and in the comment, I'm just going to go through some of these comments. The comment about like the distress from a benefactor. For me, when that's come up, it's like because I've like felt that I'm like not good enough for them somehow. That only if I'm a certain way, then I'll deserve the kindness from somebody else. And then the other way I find it difficult with the benefactor cheerleader is sort of this feeling of like undeserving. Like it's so foreign to me, and I think to a lot of us that are queer, like that that we're not hearing that from the mainstream, right? And how for me to receive that from a benefactor cheerleader, it's just like really raw and vulnerable. And usually what comes up is this feeling like that it's sort of like an imposter syndrome. Like it's like, well, you're just saying that to be nice, or you're not talking about me. You like, or you're just telling me that to make me feel better, or because you want something from me or something. Um, yeah. I lost my cat a year ago this month, and cats are funny to have be your benefactors, because cats always like walk away and go do their own thing. But my cat's been like, as you mentioned about your dog, like that's been like one of the easiest places to receive um, this kindness, to connect to kindness. and some of you have mentioned that it connects to grief, though. Like sometimes connecting to kindness just can open our heart to grief. And grief in general, right, is like a really unpleasant emotion. And I how I work with grief is the sort of pithy, like if we didn't love, then we wouldn't experience grief. If we didn't care, that there wasn't an opening of the heart that happened. um, and yeah, and there's been so much grief. I through the inspirations I did, like our chosen family, right? I was sort of focusing on that because I came out to my family, whatever, like 30 years ago now. And, but there's still like, I feel like I still carry some of their grief for not being um, the uh, mainstream sort of child, or the expectation of a, um, non-queer child. I think sometimes that's a grief that I've been um, that's interesting to me. And when I generally, um, biological family is in that difficult person category. And as I mentioned in the instruction, a lot of it has been like about me like finding peace and love and kindness, that even in the harm that they cause, like me wishing myself safety and protection has allowed me to uh, be clearer around what my limits are in terms of opening myself up to people, where I have to, or I get to, set boundaries so that there isn't that um, me seeking that kindness from people that aren't available to give it. Yeah, right. And with metta, that's a trap we quite often fall into. Uh, it's said like the what masquerades as metta can be this sort of attached love, the sort of like I'll I'll love you if you're a certain way, or the only way I can love myself is if I receive it from you. You know? Um, yeah, and I'm using this word love because I'm really inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'll read just a little bit about what he says about this true love. And he says true love about the divine abodes. So metta is one of them, and compassion and joy and equanimity. And another term for them is the immeasurables. That's how Thich Nhat Hanh is referring to them. And I love the term immeasurables because it's like there's no limit to them. Yeah. And I love the term abode because it's kind of gay. It's kind of a gay term, like abode. It's kind of a fancy term. Um, and so and divine abode, it's powerful to think of how we can use our queering powers to decorate our abodes as we'd like, you know. Um, and I think that's um, one of the powers that we have, that I think it's essential to create our abodes. And so I want to read what Thich Nhat Hanh says about um, love. So metta can be translated as love or loving kindness. Some Buddhist teachers prefer loving kindness as they find the word love too dangerous. But I prefer love. Words sometimes get sick, and sometimes words get sick and we have to heal them. We have been using the word love to mean appetite or desire, as in I love hamburgers. We have to use language more carefully. Love is a beautiful word. We have to restore its meaning. The word maitri or metta has roots in the word mitra, which means friend. In Buddhism, the primary meaning of love is friendship. And so he goes on to say that we all have the seeds of love in us. Yeah. And so that's why I love Anushka Fernandopuli's unstoppable friendliness. That's been like a challenge of mine, is of like that, um, you know, like fuck the system of oppression. I'm gonna, you can't stop me from being friendly to myself. Um, and and then when there's a challenge of like me not being able to connect with kindness toward people that I love, you know, that also becomes a challenge because generally there's a part of me that I'm not able to love, you know, and then I'm expecting them to somehow take away that pain. And that's where the other divine abodes, the next one of compassion, it's when metta touches pain, it turns into compassion. Um, and and so yeah, that's a whole other talk. But I I think about how I've yeah, how much suffering is in the world, and how turning to kindness for myself is is um is yeah, I'm at a loss of words. I mean, I just feel, I mean, the in my heart of um how vulnerable it is to and how it touches these wounds, these like scars, yeah, when we practice kindness. And yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh would say like that there's um if we just practice one day, that it's better than practicing a whole lifetime without. And and yeah. So yeah, this one more comment that was put in the chat around surprising and needed. Um, yeah, it's surprising how much for me, and I think when you practice a lot, you start to see how much hatred we've internalized. So the other thing that masquerades as metta, so I mentioned on one side is attached love, or a conditional love, and then on the other side is like just straight up hatred and ill will towards someone. And I think it's surprising to see how much we've internalized it, that hatred and ill will toward ourselves, yeah. And I think it's surprising how we can um, soothe. It's a balm like that. We can soothe that. That's something that we can generate um, on our own, and that it's always available. And yeah, and it's been a daily practice for me for 12 years. Like I come back, a lot of the automatic phrases is like, may I be safe and protected and free from harm. And that's a total response to like trauma activation. It's like, may I be safe and protected and free from harm. May I be safe and protected, free from harm. And yeah, it comes up, and sometimes it's like I beat myself up. It's like, okay, well, you're not in danger, or this is just an uncomfortable situation, or you don't want to feel so. But it's a concentration practice where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in the moment. I'm actually aware of my thoughts, and then and then from there we can open to the choice of being kind um, to ourselves.